Okay, getting ready to start up the latest spreadsheet lecture. Before we start, just go through a couple of things here. So let me share the screen. Okay, so for this week, there was some references about online resources. I believe that's been published, but I think I also put it onto our announcements also. But if not, I'll post it again today after this lecture. So there's all the various links here that you can go to cover the various topics for Excel. So feel free to let me know if there's any issues with these. I think the other thing is you've seen that the exam scores for exam 2 has been starting to come back. If there's any questions on those, make sure you let us know. We're heading towards like the home stretch, going towards the final soon. I think there's basically this last bit in terms of Excel that you guys will be picking up for the final exam. I think most of you did fairly well on the exam 2. We'll be reviewing any topics or questions you may have. I'll post out again the Google spreadsheet so you guys can put your names down if you want to schedule one-on-one WebEx sections with either the TAs or myself. We can cover any topics that you want. And if you'd like to see if you can improve on your exam 1 or exam 2 for the final, you'll have an opportunity to do that. So this week we'll be covering the last part of the Excel. Your recitation should also be picking up on various Excel topics. Next couple weeks, we'll essentially kind of wrap up on a couple of topics. And I'll actually put out like a quiz. Again, one of the quizzes that we won't be scoring, but just really an understanding type of quiz. Just go ahead and take that, and then hopefully we can get most of you with the max on the extra credit for at least my section. If there's any questions on that, make sure you let me know. And so let's go forward with pivot tables. So this week we're going to cover pivot tables and Excel tables. I think for today we'll go through pivot tables, and then we'll finish up with Excel tables and any other types of questions around Excel for Thursday. Okay. So let me close this up. Okay. So we're here on pivot tables. And I have like a spreadsheet that I'm going to work through with you guys. I'll also put that up onto the Lao lectures upload, so you can refer to that afterwards. Okay. So pivot tables, really it's basically you're going to have a table of a whole bunch of data that you'll be grouping together, getting different counts or other statistical type of information. You could be summing up the amounts, you could be counting it, you could be doing average, whatever. And it'll be doing it by various types of groupings. So we'll kind of go through that for today, and you'll see that it basically allows you to slice and group along any number of attributes. So it'll become more clear as you go through the example here. The main thing you want to do before you start looking at your data to make it a table is to make sure that you clean the data and present it in a certain way. So you want to try to avoid having blank rows or blank columns. You don't want to have subtotals in there. Those type of things, they'll get picked up when you do the pivot table, so you shouldn't have to worry about doing subtotals. And make sure your columns have unique names, and then you only have the top row set for your titles, which is this top part over here. Okay. So there's a spreadsheet that is starting off as what we're working with right here is SS4 vegetables empty. So that'll be available to you in my upload section. So it's over here. I've got that set up right here. And then let me see here. So yeah, like I was saying, you can summarize data and you can walk through the data group at Summit and whatever. And I'll walk through the example here in a second. Okay, so this first part here just kind of talks us through trying to set up the pivot table. So let me try to do it side by side here. Okay, so the first thing is you don't have to select everything on the table. You only have to select like one cell, and then Excel kind of figures out how to set up the pivot table for you, which, you know, for a small set of data, it kind of doesn't matter anyway, but it's nice. You only have to pick the one cell, and then Excel will figure out the table for you. So here, under Insert, you can see here on the left side, Pivot Table. So you select on that. And you can see here, it picks up the table range. So it tells you the worksheet starts off from A1, you know, with the dollar signs, and then E101, right? So that's this column right here, E101. So we basically have 100 records here. If you don't count the top one, it's the title bar. And then we're going to set this up into a new worksheet, which is usually what you do. Okay, so I'm going to do that. And so now we got a new worksheet, right? So let's call this pivot 1. So I just double click on it, and then I call it pivot 1. And then you can see the fields here: product, category, amount, date, and country. Okay. So you have the product field. They want to set the product field up onto the row. So I'm going to just take the product here. I click on it and I drag it down to rows. And you can see right here, you have the rows with each of the products there. Okay. Next here, do you want the amount in the values area? All right, so we're going to take this amount and we're going to drag it down to the values here. All right, and so the default that they set when you drag to the value, you can see the sigma here. It's basically to do a summation. All right, so the sum of the amount, that's what it's going to default to. All right, we'll play around with that a little bit later. And then it wants you to drag the country field to the filter area. So here's the country, and I'm going to take it to the filter. And what that does is you can see up here on the top left, you can see country, and then you can see the individual countries here. So if I wanted to, I can click on one of these to filter out the data a little bit, but we'll leave that unfiltered for now. But that's out there and it's available for you to filter on. Okay, so just working through, this is the initial setup for the pivot table. Okay, so again, this is what we started with, which is all of the details here. Okay, so it's basically listing all of these products, different categories, the amounts for them, the country of export, and the date. Okay, so let's go back here. That's what the pivot table has done. You have all the fields here you can play around with, and you can organize it by columns, rows, and you can figure out what types of sums you want over here. Okay, so you can see this is what it came out with. Grand total 283,083, 283,083. Okay. All right, so here's some different things you can do. You can do sorting and filtering, sort of like when we had the data before, but you can see like this right here. So I can sort this. So I've sorted, so you got apples, bananas, and so on all the way down. Right? I can reverse it that way, like so. All right, so interesting thing to note here, you can see all of these products here. Let me say I take out apple. And you can see it's taking out apple, which is fine. So it's taking out the amount here, but notice here, the grand total, it's also adjusted the grand total accordingly. If you had this like in a regular table, like this worksheet here, and you didn't do this correctly, if you apply some filters and you already built some sum at the bottom of it, you're actually still going to count the records that are hidden. By working with it like this, when you take the filter out, it adjusts and accounts for it. So you don't see Apple here, and that amount doesn't feed into this grand total, which is what you want. And it's the same type of thing I highlighted, I think, in the last lecture when we were talking about subtotals too, where you do a filtering out the records, and those records don't feed into your total count here. Now I put apples back in here, and you can see the total goes back to 283 again. Okay. Here, let me just do this one. Okay, so now I've applied the filter for USA, and then it adjusted. So all of these are the exports from the USA, and then that's the grand total. But I'm going to go back to all again. And then you can also do multiple items too. Okay. Let me go back to all. And we're back to 283 again. All right, so it's similar to here, where you can select by one of these products here. So it's slicing from two different dimensions here, and then it'll adjust these amounts accordingly. Okay, now the next bit we were talking about before was changing the sum. So here, this is right now, the default is to calculate the sum of all these, but let's say you want to count actually. Let me move this over here. And view value settings. And now I'm going to do the count. Okay, so now that just did the count of the records here. So you can do a quick sanity check. You can see that the grand total is 100, which is what you expect. We started off on this worksheet with 100 records. So if you don't have 100 here, then you know there's something wrong. Okay. Now the other thing quickly you can do, but I'm going to revert it back, is you can go back to here and you can put the sum again. So now you have both the count and the sum for each of these products. Okay. So you don't have to just do one at a time. So you can put a couple of them there at the same time. So that's what you can do here in terms of switching it from what it defaults to, which is the sum. And as you can see here, you can do other different types of things too, with average, max, and min. Okay. All right, so now we're going to go to 2 dimensions. So we're going to switch to another pivot table. So we're going to create a new one. So let's go back to here. So we're going to leave this pivot 1 as is. And let me save this. So I'm gonna do the upload into the upload section with the sheet that we worked on, so you can look at the different types of pivots and charts that we'll do off of it. So you can use that as an example for when you do the homework assignment. Okay. So here, let's create a new pivot table. So again, I'm just gonna select one, and we'll do the insert. Here's the pivot table. Same thing here. Here's the range. A new worksheet. Okay. Let me call this pivot 2. Just like so. So it wants the country field to the rows area. So let's do country to the rows. And what else do we have? So we want the product and the columns area. So we'll take the product, the columns. And we want the amount to the values area again. So we have that amount, drag it down to the values. And then we put the category into the filter area. So let's take the category and put it into the filter. All right, so you can see the category is fruits or vegetables. Okay. Okay, so let's see how that looks. All right, so same thing, you have the sum 283,083, which is what you have here. You've got the countries down here, you've got the products going across here. Okay, so that looks about right. Let me save this while we're here. Okay, so now we're going to take this and we're going to do some charts off of this. So you can see, again, Excel has like some default thing here that you can just pick the button and see what it comes up with. So let's hit this pivot chart here. And it defaults to this, which is fine. I think that's what we want to see. And there you go. Okay. And I can actually play around with this and it can change things on the fly. So it'll refresh this chart as I play around with things here. So let me take Canada out here. And you can see it adjusted to take Canada out of this graph here. So let me put Canada back in. And you're back to where you were before. Okay, so this is one of the default ones. And if I come back to here, chart layout. So you can see, similar to before, I can change the different layouts to whichever visualization you want to see. But I'll just kind of leave it to where it was, which is here. Okay, so I'm going to put this off to the side for a second. Let me put that over there. The next one. So this is something where we just want to look at one of the products. Let's look at apples, and we look at apples across all these different countries, and then you have a grand total here. So something like this, where you kind of have one product with multiple slices, adding up to a grand total here for basically 100% coverage of this. This usually lends itself to a pie chart. Okay, so we're gonna get into doing that. So let me highlight this. Let me highlight this part here and go back to here, pivot chart, and let's go to the pie chart. You can see this. And let me just play around a little bit. I'll just kind of set it on an angle a little bit. And then we have a pie chart. And this covers the apples across all of these different countries. And it organizes into a pie. All right, so that lays it out pretty quickly. It looks pretty nice there. Again, you want to play around with it a little bit. You can change this so you can see the percentages and the countries in there. You can do this. So any number of ways. I kind of like it like this, so I'm going to leave it like that. Okay, so this is a pie chart. This covers the apples across all of the different countries here. Okay, so let me save this. Okay, now this one is visualizing just for United States. So let me come back to here, and I'm going to take out all of these guys except for the United States. And you can see it reshapes it to have just the United States. It should match up to this, except the colors are a little bit different. But yeah, basically, like I said before, this will adjust based on whatever data you want to put in. You can see this other circle pie chart also adjusted for me too, based on that filter. But let me select all again. and everything comes back to where it was before. Okay, so I think that's pretty interesting. You don't have to go through and rejig all of these graphs, all these charts when you adjust the data on the pivot table. Okay. So this part talks about that apples exported. So I already did that over here. So it lays it out like that. Okay. So filtering for the report. This is where we put the category and the filter. So I could do this. Let's do it to fruit. Brings it down to that. Okay. Or I can switch it to vegetables. Okay, and you can see the different products that it includes here. So by applying the filter on the category, you can see all of the different products here that match up to that. And then, like I said, all of the charts that depend off of it also update once you change it. Maybe put it back to all, and you're back to here. Okay. All right, so we did the sorting before, but let me do that again here. So sort A to Z. Let me flip the sort around, go back this other way. Okay, here. All right, so these are the typical type of questions that you're going to get asked when it comes to doing things with pivot tables. It'll basically look at each of the different products or groupings and ask you things like, what's the count? What's the sum? You know, any number of statistical type of stuff off of your data. So that's typically what you use the worksheet to do. And you can, you know, these are pretty simple. We can add some more criteria to it to slice and dice it in different ways. But these are typical questions, right? So which country sold the most bananas? Which fruit had the most sales? You know, which vegetable had the least sales? And which country sold the least fruits and vegetables? When you look at your homework assignment, you'll see very similar questions to this. Right? And they're pretty easy to answer once you get it organized into a pivot table. Okay, so the Excel tables, I'll get to that in a second. Let's see here. So let me kind of put that to here. Drag this off to the side maybe. Okay, so what I did here was within each country, there was different dates associated. And I kind of broke it down to that level of detail. Okay. So you can see that if you want to take the data and really slice it, you can go pretty deep with it. And then I can close it off like this. And let's say I want to just focus on the USA. So at the high level, you can see all of these match up to what you had before, right? And then this is essentially a drill down. So if I took it like this, you can see the grand total again is 283,083. And all of these was just like it was before. You had all of the products across the top. You have all the countries on your left-hand side with the rows. But adding this extra level here gave you like this drill down capability. So you can look at it by date across all of these different products and another level of grouping. So, you know, if you had a whole bunch of different columns here, you can do something similar and kind of drill down pretty far as you want. So that's something that's also pretty interesting in terms of what you can do to analyze the data for Excel. Okay. So here, so Excel tables actually is, I think, maybe a little bit easier than the pivot tables. Okay, so Excel tables, I guess maybe it's about the same, but you can do different things with the Excel tables. So essentially, you kind of work with this and treat this as a table as opposed to grouping it into these pivot tables here. Okay, so if I go back to here, if I treat this as a table, yeah, save this. I'm going to go back to this pivot and just take this date off. So I'm going to just drag it off and this takes it out. Okay, so this keeps it pretty much lined up to how we did the PowerPoint. So don't want to get confused off of this. Okay, let me save this, come back to worksheet. So same thing, you have the Excel table. And you can see here, before we were doing the pivot table, which is all the way to the left. So if I'm here, you can see pivot table here, and then you can see table here. Okay. So this is your table function here. And similar to what we were talking about with the pivot table, you just select one of these, and then you can make it a table. Okay. So if I go into here and let me do this, again, it's the same thing. You can see that it says my table has headers, which is correct, right? So the top column is your headers. You just kind of go like that. You can set table styles. You can see like all different types here, however you want to do it. I kind of like it like this, where you have like alternating rows with different colors. A little bit easier to line things up, I think. So I'll typically go with something like that, but you can see from the list, you can set the style to any number of different things. Okay. So interesting enough, you will see things, and it's sort of like similar to before one of the earlier lectures where you can go across the top here. You have same thing, sorting. You have the different types of things you can filter on. All right, so it's fairly standard here. There's like a little bit of extra here when you're dealing with numbers. So a lot of times, unlike text, you might be doing a wildcard or something like that. For numbers, you'll be doing more stuff like this, where you might say greater than a certain number, less than a certain number. Here you can see top 10, above average, below average, things like that. Okay, and then you have your dates. And then you have your countries. Okay, so you can do any of these type of things. At the bottom, we'll be able to add a total in a second. Just give me a second here. You can see here in the top left, this is the default name. It gives it a name of table 1. So similar to what we were talking about before in terms of named ranges, you know, we can call this table, I don't know, like products. Okay. So if you want to refer to this named range by products, then you can do that. Okay, so I don't have to memorize that this is starting off essentially at A2 and going down to E101. Okay, so I could just refer to the range as products. Okay, and then it recognizes that it's a table. and these are the records, it knows that this top one is your title. So it's not going to do any data processing off of this. Okay. Let me see here. All right, so you have the header row, you have the filtering, you have the bandit rows. Let me go down a little bit. It's going to probably go into titles. Okay. So yeah, so you can see here, you got these different types of things here. I'm going to add the total row in a second here. And you can see this point here converted back to a range. Okay. Okay, so this is basically talking about different types of things you can apply once I do the total. So let me add a total row here. Let me go to the bottom just so you can see it pop in. And you can see right up here, total row. So let me click on that. And then you can see the total pops in here. So let's take a look at what we can do here. Let's do a sum here. Okay, so 283, that looks familiar, right? Let's do a filter. We'll take out the apples again. And again, you can see how this number adjusts appropriately. Again, if you just take this range and you just do a sum at the bottom, whenever you filter records out or make them not visible, the amount is still going to get calculated to the original amount, the 283. So if you do something that hides these records, the amount is not going to update correctly. Whereas if you set this up as a table or a pivot table, this amount will work out correctly. So that's something you want to be careful with. So count. All right, so the total count here, 100. So I think the way I would look at the Excel tables, it's pretty similar to pivot table, but I think pivot table probably gives you a bit more flexibility and visualization. So you're doing the same type of thing, right? I can do filters, I can do various like sums and averages and counts. But when you do it on pivot tables, I think it feels a little bit easier to kind of drag and drop and see how those data updates for you in a summary fashion. Right now, I'm doing this. You still see all the records, but it works. So it depends on what your needs are. You can use an Excel table like this. Okay. So you can do another interesting thing that you might do with this. This might be a little bit different than, I guess, on the pivot table, you can do validations here. So you can see here in this example, you want to validate, let's say, the numbers. So you want to make sure the numbers is a positive number, let's say, and you can apply that. Right, and then you can see what happens if you put something in there that doesn't match to that. You'll get an error message like this. Right, so sort of a nice way to do it compared to, let's say you put in your own checks. Let's say before, you guys remember we did the if error and whatnot. So if you had an error, it would highlight some issue there. So you can do this, and it basically allows you to visually put in this these checks here. So if I'm here, let's see. Okay. So let's say here. I guess let's put in the same check as what they have there. So it's between 0 and 9999. Okay. So let me go in here, put -5, -4, I guess. And you can see the error message. Okay. So that's something that could be interesting if you want to put in some error handling or identify certain types of records, error records. So you put in these validations. Okay. Okay. So let me stop sharing this. Okay. Come back to here. All right. So let me see if there's any questions here. All right. So no questions. Okay. Yeah. So I guess going back to my original introduction at the beginning, we'll just basically wrap up the Excel sheets for this week. So mainly covering things like tables. I'll probably do a little bit more with pivot tables and whatnot. Maybe do some lookups, VLOOKUPs and whatnot. Those are pretty much the main highlights for Excel. I mean, Excel does a whole bunch of different things in terms of scenario analysis, just rough calculations, processing a decent amount of data. So, let me know when you guys start working on your assignments or go through like any of the lectures. So are we going to see part 3 of our exams? Yes. We're going to get some sample out there similar to what we had for practice. I think, is it like 2 weeks from now? I think it's like 2 weeks from now. It's going to be exam review. So by that time, we should have that. So my office hours are by appointment. So you can just either message me or you can just put the entry into the Excel sheet, and then we'll schedule a one-on-one for the office hours. Okay. So assignment 10. Oh, that's a good reminder. I should get that out there. It actually was posted out there. It just wasn't visible yet. So I'll make sure I get assignment 10 posted out there right after this lecture. Okay, and I'm also going to upload the recording for this lecture. So yeah, thank you for reminding me about the assignment 10. I'll get that posted out there. Yeah, so I think that's the main thing. I think there were some people that also, when is the exam for Excel? That's the exam for Excel is part of the final. Okay. So if you do the practice quizzes that I put out for the last, I think in the early on when we switched to online, I put out a couple of practice quizzes. I'm going to do one more practice quiz like next week, because next week we're going to be just covering like, not like programming type of topics or not like Excel or something. It's more like topical type of stuff for next week. So I'll probably just, do some simple quiz for next week. And hopefully if everybody does that, we should be able to get everybody their extra credit for the lecture section. Okay. Yeah, so I think those are the main things I want to put out there for you guys. But like I said, if there's any questions on anything, you need to schedule one-on-one. You need to go over like exam 2. If there's any questions about exam 2 results, just send me an email or put it up onto Piazza or put onto the Google Sheets, and we'll do the necessary to spend time with you to go over those things. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, so I think we're all good for today. Like I said, reach out to me if there's any questions, okay? So have a good night.